Welcome to Own Your Breath, a sacred container to your authentic self. I'm your host, Rihanna Yusuf. By sharing of real, raw, honest experiences, expertise, and ideas from my guests and myself, together we will learn to embrace the full experience of being human. Through love, connection, and breath, let's release shame and welcome the unique beauty and strength of being authentically us. Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to Own Your Breath podcast. I'm Rihanna Yusuf. I'm a well-being life coach and transformational life coach. And with me today is Emily Sanders. She's a psychotherapist and also a licensed marriage and family therapist. And hello, Emily.
Hello, it's so nice to be with you today, Rihanna. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's my pleasure. And thank you so much for agreeing to be with me on my show, on my podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Emily is from Newport Beach. I'm literally actually talking to Emily in Singapore now. It's midnight. And in Emily, what time is it?
For me, it's 9 something in the morning. So yes, I don't know how you're doing it because once 9 o'clock p.m. hits for me, I'm ready to go to bed. So
that's because you are probably routine and more discipline. That's something I'm still learning. That's like
maybe. Yeah, but I have children, so
yeah, probably that's why.
I'm
ready to go to sleep. Bird. I think that's the difference. Self-employed, free bird. So I don't have, but I really want to be a little bit more routine, actually. All right. So Emily, tell me, when did you start being how long have you been a psychotherapist?
So I have been practicing for about 13 years now. But I've been on my own in my own practice for about 4.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And what makes you, because I know the reason why I become a life coach, like, how about you? What's the reason what makes you decide this is the career path you want to be in?
Well, I mean, ever since I was a little girl, my family was very involved in like nonprofit work and serving others. My father was actually a minister. So I think it's always been a part of my family to be very mindful of other people. And when I went to college, I had never thought about going to graduate school or anything to do career-wise. I really was raised to be a wife and a mother. And so my last year of college, I was sitting in a class and it literally just struck me that I should go to graduate school and I should go for counseling. That's what I thought it was in my mind. I had no idea what the world of therapy was. I had been to therapy a couple of times with somebody and it was not a good experience, but I ended up deciding truly on a whim that I ought to go to graduate school. And I just felt in my soul that I should go to become a therapist. And I really was ignorant to what I was getting myself into. But as soon as I sat in my classes and started learning about all the human behavior and relationship dynamics, it was like fireworks went off inside of my soul. I can't explain it any other way than that. I feel very blessed.
My hair's too. I feel you.
I just remember like, this is it. And I love it so much. And I do think it's really how my brain is wired as well. So I've always really loved people. And I'm thankful for my own education because it's helped me to sort through what are my own issues so that I can sit with people more clearly and more effectively, if that makes sense. Yes. So anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying I feel like I fell into it and I so deeply love it. Like there aren't, yeah. Honestly, when I think about my profession, it could make me cry because
Oh
I
my
love it so much.
God, I love it. I feel you. And you know what? It's shown through your work.
Thank
So if I
you.
may say so. So Emily and I, we met via Instagram. So thank you, social media.
Yeah.
There's good things about
Yeah,
social media. Um,
I know.
yeah, and this is actually the first time me and Emily met in person, actually.
Yes,
And we both
I
were
know.
excited. And look, we got a memo, black and white.
Yeah. Oh, yes, we did. That means our souls are connected, Rihanna.
Absolutely. So I was just telling Emily, like, so I can't remember, maybe me and Emily have been connected a year, or if not a bit more, through social media, through Instagram.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
I I like Emily's. I tend to follow a lot of psychotherapists, you know, uh, more than life coaches. I'm a life coach. There's nothing,
Yeah.
there's nothing right or wrong. That's just my preference, you know. And I'm very aligned to your work. Perhaps maybe there's some element of a lot of elements similar to what I'm going for in my work. And you just say it even more clearer, and you just say what I really want to say. And I, yeah, and then I just feel, again, like I told you before, I don't know what is it that, you know, like energy don't lie, you know, energy don't lie, you know, you really can feel someone's energy even across the world. Like I just feel that you are this genuine person, real person, putting your work out there, not from textbook or just from textbook, but also
Sure.
yeah, an element of vulnerability and you know, authenticity, which is so important to me, because that's what really attracts and aligns with people, isn't it?
Yes, I think that it does. And I do appreciate your feedback. Thank you. I think that we all want to connect with something that's real.
Sure.
And I think for me personally in my work, and whether that's the things that I'm writing on social media or even in my therapy sessions, it's not helpful to have big fancy words. I want the things that I have been blessed to learn, and I'm just passing along to other people the things that I've learned.
Absolutely.
I want people to be able to connect to it. So I try really hard to make it as simple and digestible as possible.
I love it.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, at the end of the show, I'll tell you which Instagram handle to follow, Emily. You really should. It's really informative, and I think it's amazing.
Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you. And yeah, like it speaks like how when you said, like how when you speak about your work, it can bring tears to you, you know, and it speaks through your work, and it's how I feel about when I do my job as well. You know, when I've got my challenges, but just when I think, every time I see my clients, it's just so fulfilling. I'm like, it's just not I will never think of another job anymore. This is like, you know, this is what I want to be. And actually, I had a very tough childhood. I came from a very tough background. So I've always knew I'm either going to be a counselor, therapist. You know, back then there's no life coach, you know, that you don't exist.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to be one of these. Now, when I don't know, but I know that's the woman that I'm going to be. And particularly speaking on behalf, because when I was growing up, I felt there's so many injustice done to me and the children around me that's of the similar position as me, you know. And I was literally already, even as a young kid, I was already planning what I'm going to be when I grow up. I'm already looking at these adults like, just shouldn't be talking to that kid that way. How can you say that to me? And like, I did not pay to raise us in a certain way, you know, things like this. Yeah, I guess so. When I've been to many therapies myself, and I couldn't connect to them in a more on a human level, if that makes sense. You know,
yeah. Why do you think that was?
First of all, of course, I understand the first session or first few session probably there's a lot of listening to be done, right? And so I find I'm always talking about everything that I've been suppressing. Um, um, However, there's lack of telling me, there's lack of guidance. First, I want to
Yes.
know. So I want to know, why am I feeling this way? You know, why am I attracting these things? You know, which part of my childhood? That I need understanding of this, and then I need guidance. You know, I guess that's why I
Yes.
ended up being life coach, because life coach, I can go more towards this. You know,
Yes.
yeah. So, but
Yeah.
I can understand as well why therapists can't necessarily do that to on a deeper scale. You know.
Yeah, but I will say, Rihanna, I do hear a lot of people saying something similar to you, where there's a real frustration in not getting much back from the therapist. So
Correct.
you're right. You could go to your salon and talk to your hairdresser. You could go to a bar and talk to the bartender, or you could go talk to a neighbor, right? So I think there are a lot of people that when they go to therapy, there are some therapists that just sit and listen, and they'll say, yeah, that's really hard, or I can see why you feel that way, and the validation is so important. But there's a lot of people that feel frustrated because they're not getting input back. And I
Correct.
do think that when you're working with a therapist, you should be getting feedback, and you should feel like you are getting something that's helping you make change. The difference is that therapists are not supposed to give solid advice. Like,
Correct.
if you were my client, I would not be saying, well, you should do exactly this with
Correct.
this relationship,
Correct.
right? We can make suggestions. We can say, have you ever thought of it from this perspective? So yeah, you should be getting something more than
Something.
just a listening ear in therapy, just so you know.
Correct. Yes, I think that's what
Yeah.
that's the reason why I think then I went on to study further. You know, because I think I get like maybe 5 minutes or maybe one day kind of feeling good from them because I got a validation, right? I feel being heard.
Sure.
But after a while, then what's next? I was still off.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So yeah. Thank you very much. So yes, so today I've invited Emily basically to speak about the importance of vulnerability and authenticity in our today's lives, actually. Yeah, so Emily, how important, in your opinion, is vulnerability and authenticity in our lives?
I mean, obviously you're asking me this question because you know it's so incredibly important, right? I think that
The
it is
reason why
more.
I want it, sorry to interrupt, but the reason why I want it
No,
is
you're fine.
coming from you, because I mean, I preach vulnerability, authenticity all the time, right? But it's still so many stigma, especially in Asian upbringing. We are all about face value, right?
Sure.
I'm fighting so hard, as you can see. I'm trying to show up because there's so many layers of limiting beliefs, you know, of fear. But I'm doing my best, and I think I did a pretty good job, if I may say so.
You can say so. Yes, you can.
So, but because of this still the stigma that vulnerability comes from weakness, or authenticity, I know, just various stigma around it. So I like to bring an expert to speak about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, like you are saying, it is so crucial. I mean, vulnerability with the right people
Yes.
is so incredibly life-giving. If we think about vulnerability, we are literally exposing parts of ourselves. So a lot of people are very adverse and shy away from vulnerability because there is risk involved. There is very much risk involved when we're vulnerable. And when we open ourselves up to the wrong people, then we get hurt. We get hurt deeply. We can be dismissed or rejected or made fun of, or something that we share that's personal can get used against us later.
Yes.
And, you know, if we grow up in a home where, you know, we are expressing our needs, or we're crying, or we need support and it's not given to us, we do learn that vulnerability only leaves us open to being hurt.
True.
But vulnerability with the right people is like magic. It's so connecting, right? To be able to open up and say, these are my sensitive parts. I want to share them with you. And for someone to say, oh my goodness, me too. Or, oh, you're not weird for that thing.
Yeah,
It just brings so much healing and joy. And so, I mean, when we talk about vulnerability, it's beautiful and there's risk involved. And I think there are a lot of people that feel like their hearts can't handle the risk anymore.
correct. I
Yeah.
agree. That's why I suppose, I mean, you probably agree with me. Because of this fear, fear or inability to handle being hurt anymore from, being so open, being vulnerable, people closed up,
Yeah.
they become more closed up, they hold back, but they are looking for that connection, that true connection, but not able to because
Yes.
of this close up. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's why it's so important when people are practicing being vulnerable and they're in this space in their life where they want to connect with other people. It's so important to remember that we cannot learn if we can trust someone until we trust them. And so there's quite a bind there because you have to understand I am going to accept the risk that comes with this
Correct.
because I can only learn if I can trust you, if you are trustworthy by trusting you. And so it's important when we're learning to trust someone not to start at like a level 10 really important crucial
Yes.
thing. We
Yes.
start way lower on the spectrum of what's important to us. Maybe we would offer something that's just a level 2 or 3 that's scary to share. So
Correct.
if it's dismissed or ignored or not handled well, the hurt to our heart is a lot smaller than giving something that is incredibly important to us. And if someone receives it well, then over time you increase the amount of vulnerability, and that's how we build closeness in a way that doesn't leave us, you know, crying our eyes out.
So wounded. Yeah. I
Yeah.
totally agree. Like I've always said, like even, I invite people to speak about their struggles or past sometimes on my podcast. So, but I've always tell them only if you're really ready and only speak what you're comfortable. As much as my platform is about vulnerability and authenticity, I, I mean, there's layers to it. There's different levels.
Sure.
I said you will experience vulnerability hangover because sometimes
Yes.
I always give them a praise up. So, like I mean, like because I've come a long way. Many years ago when I started, when I start after my depression about 8 years ago, then I wanted to be authentic, be vulnerable, and then I realized that I went from 0 to 100. Then I learned.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, I learned the different layers, levels of vulnerability. I learned to trust. And most importantly, adding to what you say about we have to trust the people, when we tell about vulnerability. What I learned as
Mm-hmm.
well is that I have to trust that my instinct, my calling of opening up to you, that I should trust my own judgment, that
Mm-hmm.
I want to share with you because there's that my instinct thinks that I trust you enough to share this with you. And I
Mm-hmm.
trust myself enough, if anything were to happen to me, that I will pick up myself again. I will be
Mm-hmm.
bruised, I'll be wounded, but I trust myself that I'm strong enough to recover. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yes.
So that what makes me still able, still continue on my path. Good. Thank you. Thank
Yes.
you, Emily. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the resiliency is so important, like you said, because there are sometimes we're going to open up and it's not going to be received. I think that if anybody approaches living a more connected life and wanting to build deeper relationships, that not everybody wants that from us. They
All
don't.
right.
Not everybody wants a deeper connection. And so we know that going into it. And like you said, saying, okay, well, this one was a miss, or this person wasn't for me, or I wish that they had responded differently, or it hurt that they wrote me off. But there are others out in the world that do want this piece of me. It may not be with you, but it is out there in the world for me to go find.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, it's absolutely true. For example, people like me, like I'm generally looking for genuine connection, deep connection.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I meet people along the way that conscious or even unconsciously, are not
Mm-hmm.
looking for that. They think they are, but they're actually not able to. You're simply not able to if you're holding back, and
Yes. Yes. There are a lot of people that like the idea of being vulnerable.
yeah.
They like the idea of being open, but when it comes down to it, they really, really struggle with it. And I see this all the time in my practice. There are actually a lot of people who think they are very open that are not very open.
Yes.
And they don't even realize how guarded they are. Even like, I could do work with people who are influencers or live a very public life, and they say, oh, well, everything is open for people to see. They can see whatever they want, but they're still extremely guarded.
I totally agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I happen, when I started life coaching, I happened to be coaching quite a few influencers, and yeah, this is the same thing. Like they've got a lot of own problem challenges, and they're actually not as open as what, I mean, the social media is different. It's work. Generally, it's basically work for them, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say too, depending on people's level of trauma, there is a difference between saying what we went through without emotionally connecting to it. Which, if
Yes.
we go through very painful things, there is a way that we can say, oh yes, well, this trauma happened, this trauma happened. And you just share about it as if you're a reporter or a storyteller. And that's not a bad thing. That's not necessarily bad to do that, because we can't live in our pain all the time.
Correct.
But if we're trying to either do personal work in therapy, or we're trying to open up to other people, to really have the brain and the feelings, the brain and the heart connected at the same time, is a real,
That's a
real
very,
vulnerability
very good
takes it.
point. Yeah, I like that. That's a
Yeah.
very good point. Yeah. I think when I first started, like a few years ago, sometimes I got invited in podcasts to speak about my own story. I get happy. And after that, I got a vulnerability hangover for a week.
Yes.
And then I have to see my other therapists. But then I realized because of this, then I learned now to speak. First, I've healed further, I've healed further,
Yes.
and I can tell my stories from a different space, more from empowerment,
Yes.
from victory rather than from a victim or sympathy, things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. So Emily, what's the difference between authenticity, right? I think like there's also confusion in authenticity. Let's explain what's authenticity anyway, and why it's important in our daily lives as well.
Well, for starters, I do think if people are going to live an authentic life, whatever that means for them, they have to be connected to themselves. So there has to be a personal comfortability to be able to say, the way that I move through the world, the way that I speak, the way that I dress, the things that I participate in, that I understand why I'm choosing those things, that there's almost natural vulnerability that comes from just allowing yourself to be seen, right? So I think that in many ways the two can be interchangeable, but somebody can live very authentically and true to themselves without actively looking for someone to share their story with or explain why they make the choices that they make. I don't know if I'm articulating that very well, but I do think for someone to live an authentic life, they do need to be very connected to parts of themselves, because if they have a tendency to want to people please, or they don't trust themselves, they're going to gravitate towards just matching whatever company they're keeping, or whatever their friends are like, even without realizing it. And that's it's not to devalue anyone that does that, but being authentic really does require a lot of paying attention to ourselves and
Self-awareness.
living in a way that doesn't feel so encumbered, right, with what people think. I think one of my children, she's a tween, she's 11 years old, and it's so interesting watching her hit this season of life where she is so hyper focused on what everybody thinks of her, right? That's like a very developmental stage, right? It's this mindset that you think everybody is staring at you, and if your backpack is different, then you're weird, and if you have your hair up when everyone else's is down, that you're weird. And there's so much safety there's so much safety in being like everybody else. And I would never push her out of that, because that's the developmental place that she's at. But as we get older, we're wanting to shift out of that and be able to say, well, what are the things I just naturally like? And it's okay if, my friend doesn't like those things. We can be different and still be close.
Yes.
So, yeah.
That's nice. So how many kids do you have?
Oh, I have 3.
And
I have 3 children. I have a 3-year-old son, a 7-year-old daughter, and an 11-year-old daughter.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Amazing. Wait, are you at home right now? Are you in office?
I am at home, yes.
Okay. Do you actually work from home?
Very rarely.
Oh, okay. So the reason I ask, because in Singapore, we just started going back to the office now.
Oh, nice.
During the COVID.
My office is my own. So I have my own waiting room. I have my own little work office. And then I have the office where I see clients. So I stayed open the whole time during the pandemic, just because so many people were struggling so intensely with their mental health, that I wanted a safe place for them to leave their home and come to. And people were desperate to come and be with somebody else. Obviously, I had telehealth for people that were too nervous to do that, but I stayed open.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah. Cool. So, okay. What are the common misconceptions of vulnerability or even authenticity? I feel like vulnerability and authenticity, they are closely linked. And so
they are very closely linked. Yes, I do believe that they feed one another, because the more that we, let's say, take a step with a friend or a partner to say, hey, I'd love for you to know this thing about me, that if it's well received, there's just more ease that comes when we're around that person and we're allowed to be ourselves. We don't have to perform to get them to love us. We don't have to be something to get them to like us. I do think that people need to understand that learning to be vulnerable and being comfortable with ourselves is something that requires us being uncomfortable with for a while. It's almost like crossing this bridge where, on one side, we're trying to figure out, would anybody love me? Would anybody want to hear the things that I dream about? Like, has anybody ever felt this way? And the fear of not being understood or being rejected is so thick that some people do not want to cross this bridge of tension and anxiety, right? Where we have to practice, where we have to mess it up, where we have to push ourselves to be uncomfy. We have to practice. Like, you literally have to practice. And on the other side, once you've practiced, there's so much more ease that comes with it. But people do have to understand it takes practice. And there's so much tension and anxiety on that little bridge that some people would rather not risk it. And they'd rather stay on that side. But there is something to be said about having to push ourselves and be willing to be uncomfortable.
Yes.
While we learn to be comfortable.
Sorry?
While we learn to be comfortable.
Correct.
It gets easier.
It does. It's a practice. It's almost like a master, really. Yeah. Yes. I mean, like, I'm a good example of this vulnerability. So a few years ago, I wasn't showing up like what you saw me on social media. I had a totally different page, not even this page, different page. It doesn't have even my face. It has, that's just what my name and what I believe. I put different other people's faces and just words or what I write. But I am aware, but I just told myself, I am going to show up gradually, but even to set up a page to speak about what I believe is hard. And then gradually, then I show up my face, put up my name, bit by bit, and eventually, and then I just decided I'm going to merge my page together. And I'm, it takes a while, it takes me years, but eventually I'm more comfortable to speak my truth now more than before. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I won't forget.
And if I can be honest, I actually still, most of the time I'm very comfortable with vulnerability. And of course, I know what certain level I should give at different situation. But having said that, there are times when, those days that my anxiety is a little bit more than usual, then I cannot show up, or showing up is more of a struggle. And I probably then listen to my body, then maybe I need to take a break. Maybe I need to slow down. Maybe let's just show up once, or let's just show up 20% of, comparing than what I used to, and that's fine. It's accepting me wherever I am. So I don't think it's, you're meant to be like always like that. It's like,
no, I don't. Yes, I can't imagine that part of us that gets a little bit nervous with sharing will ever 100% go away. I feel the same way too. Sometimes I've opened up and thought, oh gosh, like, was that too much? Or what did they think? Or was that appropriate? And for me, I was raised in a home where a lot of people projected perfectionism onto my family. My family was supposed to be a role model, and we were supposed to show everybody how to, get it right. And my parents' marriage was supposed to be the marriage that everybody modeled their marriage at. And the way that they parented us was supposed to be the way that everyone was to parent their children. And, it was a lot of pressure. And, I think that my parents did the best that they could. But I also think that they really liked that. And it did not lend themselves to living very vulnerably. I think that they chose to go the route of showing everybody the perfect stuff. And that always felt a little dissatisfying to me. And there's a part of me, I did not like being pigeonholed. I remember once I used the word stupid, and there was some older woman, and she said, Emily, you can't use the word stupid. Your father is the minister. And I remember thinking, well, that's dumb. I don't like, why should I have to be so scared? I was picked out for the things that I wore, the things that I said, the kids that I played with or didn't play with. And it was a lot of pressure. And I don't know, I didn't love that. And I think that for a while that made me overcorrect and think, well, then I'm gonna I'm not gonna watch what I say. And I don't care what you think at all, even though I totally did, right? It was very self-protective.
Yeah.
And so figuring out the middle ground and what feels, I don't know, learning to give what I want to give and withhold what I want to withhold, it has taken time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything basically, is a practice, and it takes time, and you are exactly where you're meant to be. Right? Every day we are trying our best to be better. Yeah. So the lack of vulnerability or authenticity, how do you think it impacts us as a human being, or as a person?
I think
relationship even.
Well, I think that it lends itself to feeling very dissatisfied and I would say lonely, actually. A lot of loneliness.
Totally agree. Yeah.
I think when we are not in touch with who we are and we're not living very authentically, just personally, there's such an ache there, right? And a lot of people do have very many pains, and so they have to disconnect from themselves to even be able to survive, but that has to be mended. So in general, someone that struggles with vulnerability often struggles with it inside of themselves, so they feel disconnected from themselves. And then once they start to be connected with themselves, naturally they long to be connected to other people. And so there's a lot of isolation that comes with struggling with vulnerability. And yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, I totally agree with you. Like my recent consultation, actually just a few days ago. So this guy was telling me about how, how he feels lost. Like, he has a great career, great family, all these things, but somehow he feels lost. He feels like he's empty inside. Is there something wrong with him? Is what else he needs to do with his life? What he needed to add? I said, nothing. I said, you just need to connect more to yourself. You feel lost. You feel like there's a void within you because you've abandoned yourself. You disconnect with yourself, perhaps without you even realizing. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
yeah, so there's a lot of work. I feel, I believe a lot of the answer, a lot of work lies in our inner work.
So much.
Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, what are the examples of vulnerabilities? So here's the thing, right? I think like vulnerability can, it really has a lot of different meaning to different people.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. I'll give a few. You go first. Yeah. What are a few examples?
Like ways that vulnerability can show up.
Yeah.
So vulnerability can just be sharing a dream, like a daydream that you have, or something that you've always wanted for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, I like that. Saying I miss you.
Yeah.
Or actually even saying like, I like your work. It can be a vulnerable, basically a compliment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Giving a compliment. I think when people think about things that are vulnerable, they only think about sharing like trauma or negative things. But you are right, because to give someone a compliment is like saying, I want to be just a little bit closer to you. I like you. And it's scary sometimes, isn't it?
And what do you think, actually, since we are on this point, what do you think is hard for some people to give compliments? Because I come from a family that for the longest time, they improve a bit recent years, but for the longest time, it's hard for them to give compliments, particularly my mother. Like, it's hard for her to compliment. It's like I always feel whatever I do, it's not good enough. Just because whatever I've achieved, she will always say, there's always something else. So why do you think? But that doesn't mean she don't appreciate what I do.
Sure.
And obviously, in the past, I tend to attract men that also cannot compliment me. I'm
That's
going.
fun.
Exactly, right. I'm like, here we go again. So why do you think they can't do so? And I know they care for me, but I personally, after a while, I have to leave because I feel I don't get the connection I'm looking for in this relationship. So I eventually, if you can't change, I have to leave because it begins to hurt me. It triggers my own wound, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that, let's say we were sitting in a therapy session, I would be asking someone who's sharing me your story, well, did you ever wonder actually if your mother didn't like you? Do you wonder if she didn't love you? And most people would say, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure she does. But there is something so powerful about our words and our actions lining up, that's where magic really happens, and that is very vulnerable. So you may have a parent who loves their child, but it feels too risky to say it, right? Because again, words and actions lining up is ultimate vulnerability. So some people in their relationships, they can show up and do kind things, but they cannot say or commit. And then you have other people that they're just words, but there's no follow through. But why people lack voicing physical affection, there's a lot of reasons that could be. There could be cultural factors there. They could be scared of rejection. They may think, well, I feel uncomfortable with saying warm things, so what if that person feels uncomfortable hearing warm things, so we just won't say anything.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree. And what Emily just spoke actually applies to vulnerability, why people can't be vulnerable. I think because basically they are afraid of being judged, maybe saying too much, saying lesser, or they're not saying things enough, Yeah, we agree.
Yes. So there is a lot when people are personally very uncomfortable with vulnerability, they project that onto other people and assume that everyone else is also uncomfortable with whatever vulnerable, whether that's affection or a compliment or a hard conversation. They assume that, that the person feels the same way. And that may not be the case.
Yeah, yeah. So why do you think, so you mentioned like parents, like, like even if they love the children, but they're not showing action, it's not complete. And if they're showing action, but they're not saying it, it still doesn't fit the puzzle well, isn't it?
Yes.
But why? Because sometimes people say it's the actions that matters most. It doesn't matter if they don't say it. However, we both know that it does matter.
It does matter. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, it matters so much because we can behave in any certain way, but we have to explicitly say why we do what we do so that it makes full sense in our mind, because making assumptions is very dangerous. You can see that when two people maybe are flirting with one another, and maybe one person, maybe the guy will show up and he'll bring, his coworker a donut. And the girl is sitting there thinking, well, did he bring me this treat because he likes me? Or are we just like work friends? Or did he get an extra donut at the shop for free and he just didn't want it? Right? There are so many reasons that girl could have been given a donut. This is the weirdest example. Anyway, there are so many reasons that girl could have been given a donut. And so for him to say, hey, I thought of you. I remember you said you like chocolate sprinkled donuts, so I got you one. It at least brings him a little closer, right?
Yes. So
Yeah.
true. This is a very good point. In fact, actually, I've discussed a lot of range of subjects with my friends always, but this particular one talking about why words and actions, they have to come together, and it's so important. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah.
I mean, like for example, like words are so important to me, and I always, like, for example, like my mother, she's amazing, my mother is amazing, but like sometimes when I meet her, when I don't feel good, I need her to say something. I need, and she couldn't, she probably just say the opposite of what I need, but I do know she cares, and she will call me the next day, ask me, shall I get you food, things like that. But it's not enough for me, and it's nothing to do about being grateful, but there you go, it needed to come together.
Yeah. Like what, if I make my husband's lunch and he'll say, thank you for making my lunch, Emily, I'll say, you're welcome. I do it because I love you. I even though it seems like something so piddly, yeah, and it's just silly, I made the lunch, I could say, oh yeah, you're welcome. But I really want him to know that if I do something kind, it's because I love him. Or, if I see one of my children and they wake up in the morning, I'll smile real big and say, oh, my heart's so happy to see you. I just love you so much. Right? I want it to be very clear why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I do what I do for the people that I love.
That's correct. And especially because we all have got different characters, not all five fingers are the same,
No.
Yeah, I think this is such a great point. I might interpret your action differently than what you're actually trying to convey to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I like that a lot. Thank you.
Which is so, and people should be empowered to say, oh, you did this nice thing for me. Why? Or what does this mean to me? Like, it's okay to also ask clarifying questions when we're in a relationship,
Oh,
and say,
yes,
why
that's a
do
good
this?
practice actually, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, not everybody knows. Actually, a lot of people don't know exactly what to do. And by
No, they don't.
communicating clearly, why and or what you need is so important. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's why, I mean, you've probably noticed on my Instagram page, a lot of what I talk about, I'm not a big person who advocates cutting people out of their life. There's just such a spectrum of learning that most people still have to do, that they need help knowing how to connect. And to be fair, there are some people that are just so painful and refuse to change or are harmful beings, that there are seasons where removing someone from our life is the absolute healthiest choice.
Yeah.
But more often than not,
Yeah.
we all just need a little help.
Yes.
Yes.
I totally agree. Like a couple of years ago, I think I wrote something about this, about how, I think the world went crazy about how cut out people, cut out this,
Yes.
cut out. So, and I mean, to perhaps at one stage in my life, in my 8 years ago, I did the same thing. And I think you still need to do if it's really toxic to you.
Yeah.
However, like you, because now I understand people that trigger us really, there's just deeper work for us to do. Like, I find people that triggers me actually. I mean, I probably get hurt on the moment, but I'm very quick to shift. Like, actually, she's triggered something, some wounds within me that I probably needed more attention from me, needed more healing from me. And I look at them actually as my teachers. This is how I process things. And maybe to some people, I don't have to be close to them if I really don't align to them, but I don't need to cut them out, yeah.
Yeah, I tend to think of it in terms of layers, almost like yeah, well, you could use an onion or whatever, but some people should be very, very close to us in our inner circle. And then there are layers. Some of our friends are going to be friends that are friends we just go to the movies with and we don't speak very deeply. Or maybe it's someone who, you take your kids to the park together and you chat about TV and that's all that it is. But there should be some people that are very close to you, and the people that hurt you should be bumped back a few notches.
Totally agree. So
Yeah.
I'm someone who I have so much love. Sometimes I think I have so much love enough to give the whole world, So my friends, one of my friends always say, like, you love him more than you love than he loves you, or you love her more than she could contribute to you. I said, it doesn't matter to me, because what I give is what I sincerely, this is my ability, At the same time, when I say I love someone, that doesn't mean love, like how you translate love. So for me, love, there's primary and secondary colors. And there's the layers of colors, So ask me first, which part of the layers of colors are they? My primary circle or secondary circle, and they still deserve my love, but in a different spectrum. Yeah, that's how I put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are going to be some relationships that we do understand that we are giving a little more than we get. We just do need to be very intentional and understand why, and check in and see, is there resentment with that? So we have to kind of ebb and flow
All
with
right.
that, because not every relationship is going to be perfectly mutual.
Correct.
And there are seasons of life where we may have to support someone more than they're supporting us. And the hope is that when it comes time for them to support us, that we can lean on them a little more heavily. So the closer, yes, you get to the core relationships, it should be more mutual and
Yes.
so on. Yeah.
I think so for me, because I'm kind of more giving in terms of love, right? However, I agree. The closer ones, it should be mutual, or at least not far off. And if I find that it's not mutual, you'll still be in my picture, but I actually will start withdrawing back what I've banked in. And, and it's, of course, because it's a way of protecting myself, but just because I can see, if it's not mutual, then I don't need to stay there and start, begging for something that's not being served.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that they may not be able to give.
Correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's another thing. I don't believe that. I lean more towards not looking at people as they are deliberately trying to hurt you. But I try to look at people more, they're just not able to, or they're probably not aligning to me, or they don't have the ability.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, Annalie, okay, so there are a lot of confusion in practicing both vulnerability and authenticity these days. Hang on. So what are your advice or your tips on this confusion, or is there any practice that people can start with?
I mean, one of the biggest things is just to notice, to start to notice yourself. For people to pay attention to, is there somebody that they're really drawn to that they'd like to get to know better? To have our radar up for people who could be potential safe places with whom we can practice opening up to, or making our friends. I think that it's really important for people to pay attention and notice themselves. Notice what kinds of things start to make them anxious. Notice when they are wanting to speak up but hold back. There's so much importance in just observing ourselves, and there's a lot of people that don't even do that. I can't tell you, well, I'm sure you see this a lot in your coaching practice, where you will ask people things about themselves, what makes them happier, what gets them excited, and they don't know.
Yes.
They don't know.
Yeah.
And so without the knowing of ourselves, the comfortability with ourselves, the things that hurt us, the things that we long for, the things that we dream about, I don't know what there is going to be that we can offer someone else.
Absolutely. So good. Yeah, so true. Yeah. Everything comes back to ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way that I show up as a therapist with my clients, and while I'm going into therapy sessions and I'm not talking about myself, it's most certainly not about me.
Right.
I do want to make sure that I'm showing up as my full self, that if someone is sharing something that breaks their heart, that I'm not disconnecting from it because I'm overwhelmed by sad feelings. That if somebody is talking about something that really excites them, that I can show up presently to, get excited with them. I have to be in touch with myself to still be able to bring my whole self into the room as a therapist and know what I'm putting out and what I'm holding back. So it allows us to show up more effectively. So for anybody that's just in that space where they want to connect with other people, they cannot forget that they have to do some paying attention to themselves too.
I totally agree. Yeah. Without knowing ourselves, and like you say, our dreams is hard to offer to another person, and a lot of people, I included for the longest time in my life, I've got my dreams, but I wasn't so connected to myself. So I was busy, looking outside of me to fill the void within me, and expecting other people to give it to me, but it's not possible, is it? If you don't do it for ourselves. So my mantra, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's really important too, that we have to learn to be comfortable with our feelings. And the way feelings work is we don't just get to cut off some feelings. They're all there or they all go. And so if we're wanting to connect more joyfully with other people, that also means preparing to be able to mourn and to be sad and to feel frustrated and to grieve. So I just want to throw that out there, that we're talking about being more authentic and living in a way that's very vulnerable, that we have to learn how to tolerate our feelings.
Yes. Yes, because sometimes those uncomfortable feelings um, when they appear, I find myself sometimes being hard on myself, like, oh, why are you feeling this way? And then very quickly, then I catch myself like, stop, you're hurting, and embrace it. You're hurt, feel sad, you're okay, it's okay. I literally have to tell myself, and sit with it. But again, it took, it took me a long time to come to be where I am. It's all a lot of unlearning and relearning.
Oh, so yes, so much unlearning.
Yes.
The unlearning is harder than the learning.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Prior to unlearning, there's a lot of battle with ego, right? A lot of battle trying to prove people wrong. No, that's not trying to insist that you are right, and it's part of the process. Yeah.
It is.
So, Emily, okay, this is an important question for me, because for me and for other people, I want them to know. So I do sometimes do for work for corporate wellness, corporate well-being, and I do more on well-being, stress management, things like this. However, now I'm entering more towards vulnerability and authenticity. Why it has to be applied of course, in a calculated manner to at work, so that you can you can build a stronger team.
Yes.
And more. Why do you think it's important that vulnerability and authenticity is adapted at work as well?
The more that closeness is created, there is more of a pull to work together as a team. I think what's so challenging is a lot of people find that so many workplaces are very toxic and there's such an abuse of power. And so, people do have to be aware that if they want to be vulnerable, again, it needs to be in a safe place. And so sometimes walking that line when you're in a professional setting is really risky. But I do think that if leadership within a company can help create safety, that the people that they're leading will follow suit, just like a shepherd bringing his sheep, right? That, we can't stop here at the river because it will wash you away. We have to wait for still water. And so the little sheep just follow their shepherd, and counting on the shepherd to tell them when it is safe. And so I do think that so much of this does stem from leadership, and that leadership would make it safe to express needs that their employees have, that they would create safety for employees to connect with each other. The camaraderie that's built just lends itself to making the workplace a more joyful place, for sure.
I like that. Thank you so much. If a company is able to embrace this culture, to adapt this culture, how do you think it positively will impact the staff and also the company itself?
Again, like when you have happy employees, you have the product that's produced is more happy. If you have workplaces, where there's a lot of gossip or backbiting, or people are scared to express their needs, or if they make a mistake, that they are too scared to go to someone who's above them because they're scared they're going to get made fun of, or, well, you should have known this, or they would get fired. If the leadership can create safety for their employees to say, hey, even if you mess up, we just want to know, and we're going to get through it together. We'll figure it out. There's room for error here. There will be less secrecy within the company. I think that that's actually it's a really important thing, that creating vulnerability in the workplace does lend itself to more honest employment. And that if there is an issue that does come up somewhere in the system, that it can be addressed. If people are too scared to be honest when they make a mistake, they're more apt to hide it. And that's problematic. That can only feed problems down the line.
Yeah, so basically you actually create more safe environment, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that. Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily. Is there anything else you like to add on our subject, vulnerability or authenticity?
Not necessarily. I would just say my closing thought is that for people who've been hurt so much, especially in their families of origin, their home growing up, that just because you didn't receive what you needed when you were small doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the world. And that it's out there.
Yeah, thank you. So that's, yes. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been such a pleasure, great insights, and I cannot wait to listen to this podcast again.
Oh, thank you for having me, Rihanna. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I look forward to have you again in future, perhaps.
Yes, I will happily come back.
Welcome to Singapore.
Oh, thank you. I would love to come in person sometime.
Yes, you should. And you know what? I will come down and look for you. Surprise.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Emily, again. Till next episode, I'll see you guys. Thank you.